evening, everyone. My name is Elliott, and thank you all for being here. Before I begin, I want to warn you that there are going to be spoilers for the Harry Potter series, so if you're reading them or planning on reading them, please close your ears when I start talking about that, because I do not want to ruin that for you. I also want to give a special thank you to my dad, who, as a Christmas present this year, read all 7 books so that he could enjoy my thesis to its fullest. That being said, I hope you enjoy. In a world where dragons soar through the skies, and where goblins lurk in the shadows, and where men fight in epic duels, the line between myth and reality blurs. This is a realm full of stark contrasts, where good men fight evil men, and where love flourishes amidst the horrors of battle. Yet, it is also a world of darkness, where thieves rob and steal, and where death lurks around every corner. Gods, mortals, and mythical creatures all meet on one battlefield to decide the fate of the world. This is the world of fiction, and it's a world that I love dearly. Now, I want you all to imagine leaving this building right now and finding the nearest witch or wizard, maybe even a hobbit or a lion, and ask them to teach you virtue. It's impossible, right? That's because fiction isn't reality. It's not real, it's fake. But that does not mean that it does not have anything real to offer to us. Fiction may be built on imagination, but it reflects our deepest truths. Its story shows what courage looks like in the face of fear, what kindness means for us to give, and what integrity feels like when the whole world is watching or when nobody is watching. So yes, fiction is fake, but the virtue it teaches is not. Ultimately, fiction invites us to explore what it means to be human in a world full of light and darkness. There's been much discussion on whether reading fiction having spiritual benefits, and there are 2 thoughts that I would like to look at. Writing in the 5th century in his book Confessions, St. Augustine expresses concern that fictional stories may distract us from pursuing the truth and a deeper relationship with God. He observes that, quote, "And men go abroad to admire the mountains, yet pass over the mystery of themselves without a thought." In other words, human beings tend to focus on outward adventures while ignoring their inner life. And so he questions whether reading stories for pleasure, especially those with immoral or misleading content, might harm one's devotion to God rather than dystopia. Still, Augustine does not completely reject fiction. He allows that stories have value if they reflect the truth. He writes, quote, "Wherever truth may be found, it belongs to his master meaning Jesus." In contrast, C.S. Lewis, a 20th century writer and theologian, sees fiction as a powerful tool for spiritual and emotional growth. In his work, An Experiment in Criticism, he writes, quote, "In reading literature, I become 1,000 men, but yet remain myself." Thus, for Lewis, fiction can expand our imagination and empathy, and it allows readers to step into other people's lives while still keeping their own identity and faith. In this way, Lewis believes that fiction can help readers understand human nature, grapple with moral questions, and grow spiritually. He even sees fiction as a way to communicate Christian truths, or otherwise evangelism. His own fiction stories, such as the Chronicles of Narnia, use allegories to explore biblical themes and encourage reflection on God's moral order. Ultimately, both Lewis and Augustine agree that fiction is more than just mere entertainment. It can help us explore life's deeper questions and reflect on our place in God's story. Again, as Augustine writes, "Truth belongs to his Lord wherever it is found." My argument this evening is that reading fiction can be a great way to grow in virtue, because it engages us with the struggles of human experience and can nurture the mind and spirit in ways other practices can't. Of course, this does not have to happen, because just as money can be misused, so can our reading. But in this case, the problem isn't with the book, but with the reader. Even reading an evil book can still be beneficial if read with a critical mind, because by recognizing flaws in arguments, you can grow in wisdom and become better equipped for life. For the next few minutes, I want to give you a few examples of how fiction can help you grow. First, by fostering empathy, and second, by providing valuable role models to follow. First, fiction helps readers grow in empathy. For example, it was well recognized that Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, helped bring an end to slavery in the South. But how so? Because the book illustrated so vividly the hardships of slaves, and in so doing convinced many people in the North that slavery of Black Americans needed to be stopped. Historian Robert McNamara said in this way, "The publication of Uncle Tom's Cabin was, of course, one of many events in the decade of the 1850s that put the country on the road to the Civil War. It was not a direct cause of the war, yet the famous work of fiction certainly changed the attitudes in society about the enslavement of Black Americans. And the emotional connection of Uncle Tom's Cabin is still felt to this day. Earlier this year, as I was listening to a podcast, Think Biblically, the host described how his wife found herself so caught up in the story of Uncle Tom's Cabin that she found herself praying for Tom. She even commented that she could not even imagine not speaking to Tom in heaven, even though he's not a real character. If you've read a powerful fiction book, I'm sure you can relate to what I just said. It's easy to find yourself cheering for, laughing with, or crying over a fictional character, as I've done many times. This connection shows how fiction can foster empathy in very powerful ways. Many scholars compare a fiction to a bridge, and empathy is the ability to cross that bridge. Or in other words, just as a bridge connects two distant places, fiction allows us to travel into the worlds and places and cultures of other people. And with empathy, we don't just stand on the edge of that bridge, we walk across it. And when we are done, we have felt a connection with the world that is not ours, and we have the possibility of returning to our world with a better understanding of what it means to be human. My second argument, besides the potential to foster empathy, reading fiction can profoundly shape our lives by giving us men and women of virtuous character to admire and emulate. I cannot help but mention 3 different examples where this has occurred in my life. First, I want to consider C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, and specifically the book The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. In this book, we encounter Aslan, the great lion, who is a clear representation of Christ. When Lucy first hears about Aslan, she timidly asks, "Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion." To which Mr. Beaver responds, "Of course he isn't safe, but he's good." This exchange captures the essence of Aslan's character. He's not safe, meaning he's not predictable in the way we might want our heroes to be, but he is in fact good. And Aslan's goodness is later demonstrated in how he sacrificed himself for Edmund, a boy who has betrayed his family and brought danger to Narnia throughout the entire story. When the White Witch demands Edmund's life in exchange for betrayal, Aslan willingly steps forward to take his place. The soldiers shave his mane and spit on him, an image strikingly similar to the humiliation Christ suffers on the cross. And he lays down his life for Edmund, much like Christ did for humanity. Aslan's sacrifice is a beautiful demonstration of love, forgiveness, and fortitude. And these are the virtues that the people of Narnia, and indeed the readers, are called to emulate in their own lives. Another example I find compelling is from J.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, as the theme of virtue is explored throughout the journey of the unlikely hero, Frodo Baggins, and his loyal friend, Samwise Gamgee. Frodo, though small and unassuming, has been chosen for a monumental task, to destroy the One Ring. And the journey is filled with both external struggles against the forces of evil and internal struggles with the power of the ring itself. Yet, while Frodo is the central figure of the story, it is his companion, Sam, who truly embodies virtue in the most profound ways. At the beginning of the journey, Sam is portrayed as Frodo's employee and servant. But over time, his role evolves from a devoted friend, protector, and then confidant. Sam's loyalty is unwavering. It is clear that, like a good friend or a brother, he would lay down his life for Frodo without hesitation. And at one point, when it comes to it, Frodo is overwhelmed by the ring's power and demands that Sam leave him behind, and then Sam refuses, saying, "I can't carry it, but I can carry you." He doesn't understand the burden that Frodo carries, but he does understand the importance of being by a friend in their darkest times. Sam says, "It's like the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much evil had happened? But in the end, a new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out all the clearer." Sam's loyalty and courage are shining examples of virtues that can make a difference in the world, reminding us that it's not the size or the status of a person, but the strength of their character that makes them truly heroic. Samwise Gamgee is like a sturdy oak tree in a storm. Quiet but strong, standing firm when everything else is uncertain. Sam's loyalty to Frodo holds everything together and is the guiding light for others in the fellowship through their darkest times. Finally, let's turn to J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, which follows the life of a young wizard destined to defeat the Dark Lord, Voldemort. Harry's journey is marked by countless struggles, but the ultimate act of virtue comes at the end of the series when Harry willingly offers himself to Voldemort to protect his friends. Harry's decision to walk to his death echoes the sacrifice of Christ, a parallel that is drawn throughout the series. The key moment in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows occurs when Harry realizes that to protect his loved ones, he must die, and he walks to Voldemort, fully prepared to give his life without complaint. As his mentor Dumbledore says, it is our choices that show who we truly are, far more than our abilities. This quote encapsulates the essence of Harry's virtue. He chooses to act for good of others, even at the cost of his own life. Harry's act of self-sacrifice not only protects his friends physically, it also marks them with a protective charm. The act of protection, which was born of love, ultimately enables Harry to return from death, defeating Voldemort and restoring peace to the wizarding world. Harry's willingness to die for those he loves mirrors Christ's sacrifice on the cross. Like Jesus, Harry does not seek power or glory, rather he uses his position to fight for a better world. Harry Potter is like a wand in a dark room, small but with the power to light up the whole world around him. He may seem unassuming at first, but his courage and selflessness spark hope in the darkest of times. Through the characters of Aslan, Sam, and Harry, we learn that true greatness lies in the selflessness and the ability to put others before ourselves. Though they are all fictional characters, they give us role models that can help us follow in their steps and cultivate virtue along the way. Now, fiction cannot automatically create virtue in us, but if we are open to it, it can teach us lessons that can shape who we are and give us great moral lessons. In the end, these stories remind us that in the world often filled with darkness, there is always greatness to strive for. Nevertheless, some people just don't get it. They don't believe that fiction can foster empathy or give us amiable role models. Some people argue that true empathy can only be developed through real-world experiences, that fictional characters can be hard to relate to, much less emulate. And of course, there are truths to these arguments. All fiction is not created equal, and some books are better suited than others. And even with the best of fiction, reading does not automatically translate to virtuous living. The key ingredient, and get this, the key ingredient is how a reader approaches fiction that he or she is reading. In Where the Red Fern Grows, Billy's heartfelt prayer for dogs symbolizes his deep desire and faith. But when his prayers aren't immediately answered, he becomes greatly disheartened. Turning to his grandfather for guidance, he learns that while faith is important, God also requires us to, quote, meet him halfway by putting in the hard work ourselves. Like Billy, we must meet the story halfway, working through its challenges and complexities to uncover the rewards. For it to be transformative, the reader must actively engage with the story and its characters, otherwise the potential for growth will remain unrealized. One person who would wholeheartedly agree with me is G.K. Chesterton. Chesterton, a 19th century philosopher and author himself, said this: literature is a luxury, fiction a necessity. Literature is a luxury, fiction is a necessity. In other words, fiction is indispensable if we want our souls to embrace teaching timeless lessons and enhancing in their virtue. When readers immerse themselves in fictional stories, they can better understand other cultures and experiences. A second argument that critics often make is that fiction lacks amiable role models or admirable role models, claiming that characters are exaggerated and unrealistic. However, fiction offers characters who embody virtue, struggle with vice, and face moral dilemmas. Through their stories, readers can gain insight into what virtue truly looks like. Now, we have explored the heights and depths of the world of fiction, from the gently rolling hills of Middle-earth to the snow-swept grounds of Narnia and all the way to the magical school of Hogwarts. I have argued that fiction fosters empathy by putting flesh onto virtue and vice. Here I say that fiction is not solely for entertainment purposes, but that it shapes us if we read it well. Finally, I said that fiction gives us amiable role models to follow. The role models I presented were Aslan, Sam Gamgee, and Harry Potter. Now, in conclusion, I want to ask my thesis in reverse. What would happen if we did not read at all? The argument of this paper is not that a person can be virtuous without fiction, but simply that our lives would be impoverished without it. Yes, most Americans know how intellectually they should love, forgive, sacrifice, and live for things that last. But it's another thing to be formed by some of the greatest fiction stories ever told. The love of the father who forgives his prodigal son, the sacrifices made by the Good Samaritan, and the importance of building your life on solid rock and not shifting sand. These are all fictional stories from the Bible, and most would agree we are better off by knowing these stories. As we follow our heroes in their struggles and their triumphs, We see them not just as fiction, but as reflections of the human condition within us, mirroring our desires, our fears, and our truths. Though our fears aren't always Voldemort and our goals are to destroy the One Ring, fiction helps us seek truth and beauty and understand others' people by stepping into their shoes. What does this mean for all of us? Let me suggest 3 brief ways you can apply this truth. First, and most obviously, read fiction, especially those stories that have moral elements in them and display what is good, true, and beautiful. If you are not sure what you should read, the books that I have mentioned so far are a great place to start. Second, try and become a storyteller. In the book Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury envisions a world where all the books are burned. So the only way for a book to survive is for the people to memorize it and pass it on verbatim. And if that doesn't happen, fiction disappears and the works become lost. By becoming a storyteller, you not only ensure that fiction will live on, but that the potential for virtue and that will change people's lives will live on as well. Finally, and by far most important, I would like to encourage you to read the Bible. Why? Because the Bible is the lens by which we read all of fiction. God's word is the standard by which we determine whether a piece of fiction is faithfully pointing us to what is good, true, and beautiful. In the Bible, we find the standards of virtue and vice, stories of strength and power, and of course, the most epic journey of the Son of God who died on a tree for everyone here and rose from the dead. No, I know that's not fiction, but I have to admit that is the greatest fiction, that is the greatest truth I've ever heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliott. Now begins our thesis defense portion. Elliott, your first question. The word fiction originates from the Latin word fictio, meaning a fashioning or a feigning. Feigning means to pretend, to be affected by. When people want to imitate the Harry Potter books, they'll dress up like a wizard and pretend to feign magical powers. So how can we tell when fiction promotes a mere feigning versus actual virtue?
Thank you for your question. As a person who dressed up as Harry Potter for many years in a row, like 5 years in a row I think, yeah, that's just a pretend thing. But I'm talking about people who see Harry's love and sacrifice and are inspired to emulate those characters in their own life. The key, as I said before, is how we engage with these stories. Reading fiction does not automatically make someone wise, just like reading the Bible does not make someone holy. What matters is our purpose. If we read with a desire to grow and learn, fiction can help us understand others, think deeply, and seek what is good. For Christians, this means reading with faith, looking for what's true and meaningful, and letting the stories help shape us for the better. I would like to think about Christmas pageants or passion plays. Some people can do this and be pretending, but you don't have to. People dress up and act out Bible stories, but we don't just call that pretending. We see it as a way to reflect and connect with something deeper.
So you would say Harry Potter and a lot of the fiction works you've mentioned are connecting to something deeper.
I would say that for sure. I think, but as I said before, it's engaging with these stories in the right way and having a heart that is willing to be open to that. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Let's your next question. Fiction offers its readers a variety of characters, some of whom, such as Aslan, model perfect virtue. Others, such as Harry, although generally virtuous, demonstrates imperfection. Does the degree of a character's perfection affect his or her ability to cultivate virtue in the reader? Why or why not?
I would say that it does not, because the only perfect person that has ever walked on this earth is Jesus Christ himself. And all of God's disciples were not virtuous in themselves. Matthew was a tax collector, and many of the stories that we've read this year, such as Les Mis, have people that are not virtuous. Jean Valjean struggles with many things. He went to jail for stealing bread, and he ends up becoming a virtuous person. And that's what I can relate to, because I'm not a virtuous person. No one here is a virtuous person, but we all can become virtuous people by reading fiction with a willing heart.
Great, thank you. Next question. The 4 cardinal virtues are justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude. Use Using only Harry Potter characters, provide examples of these 4 virtues.
Thank you so much for your question. Can I is that
Good. And then I'll say them again if you want to write them down. Justice, prudence,
This will be easy.
temperance, and fortitude.
Harry. And fortitude, you said?
You can take a little bit of time.
I can recite them. Justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude. I'm going to start off with an easy one. Harry is the most just person that is in those books. He does not try to build up himself. He decides to give up his life, like I said. Hopefully that didn't spoil anything for y'all. But he decided to give up his life to save his friends when they did not deserve it. No one here deserves it. I say that prudence comes from Dumbledore. Like I said earlier, he says, it is our choices that make who we truly are, far more than our abilities. Dumbledore has unredeemed flaws, as if you've read the series. He's not a perfect man, but he does strive to become as close as he can, and I believe that takes a lot of prudence to do so. Temperance, I said Hermione Granger. She is wise, she's always uplifting and encouraging, and then in the films, Ron says, we wouldn't last 2 days without Hermione, and I think that kind of sums up what Hermione does. She might not be the Christian form of temperance like we might want our heroes to be, but we can see the virtue in that. And in fortitude, I'm ending with Harry because I started with Harry, I'm ending with Harry. I'm always with Harry. I think he just really emulates fortitude in the way he gives up his life. I know I've said that a lot, but that's the most Christ-like thing we can do is to give up our life for one's friends.
Great, thank you. Your last question, Elliott, is in advocating for fiction's appeal to empathy, you provided an example of realistic fiction, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Does this novel's fictive nature elevate it above nonfiction works that likewise reveal the horrors of slavery, particularly regarding its ability to cultivate empathy in the reader? If so, what distinguishes a realistic fiction novel from a nonfiction work on the same subject?
Thank you for your question. Uncle Tom's Cabin can create a deep sense of empathy in readers that memoirs like Night in the Hiding Place, which are some of my favorite books to read, they just simply, they can't in some ways, but they can do better than Uncle Tom's Cabin in lots of better ways. Like I said before, I'm not saying that nonfiction is necessarily better than fiction. I'm saying that fiction puts flesh onto virtue and vice. Characters like Uncle Tom and Little Eva were designed to be symbolic and idealized, representing the pure innocence of a Christian virtue. And I think the real answer to the question is that Harriet Beecher Stowe made Uncle Tom's Cabin specifically to create empathy with their readers, whereas books such as Night by Elie Wiesel was as a memoir to remember the horrors of the Holocaust. And I think that's the essential ingredient, is that it was supposed to bring out empathy in characters and stop slavery and stuff.
Great. Great job, Elliott.